In the year 331, that Alexander the Great defeated the Persian Emperor Darius at the Battle of Guatemala, a new master emerged on the world stage and transformed the history and culture of three continents. However, Alexander died in the prime of his life at the age of 32 because of debauchery and intoxication. Before the death of Alexander, his desire was to establish a Eurasian state. His scheme was to amalgamate the Greeks with the Asians. This was implemented by the widespread marriage of his troops with the colored women of the East. Most of his troops remained in the subjugated countries and became absorbed in the native population. After the death of Alexander, his vast empire was divided among his generals. Ptolemy received Egypt and Seleucus received Asia. As time elapsed, there was constant war between these two dynasties. By the year 198 BC, the descendants of General Seleucus had their capital in Syria, just north of Palestine. In this same year, the Seleucid dynasty in Syria compelled Egypt to give up Palestine, the land of the Jews. The king of Syria at this time was Antiochus III. When Antiochus IV usurped the throne in Syria, he entertained the thought of uniting Alexander's empire. This meant the conquest of Egypt. However, the province that bordered on Egypt was Palestine, which stood in his way. At this time, the Jews would not accept Greek culture. Nevertheless, Antiochus was determined to Hellenize the Jews. The army of Antiochus marched into Palestine to support Melanus, the leader of the pro-Syrian party. As a result, many Jews were killed. Others escaped to the hills and to Egypt. Only those Jews that supported Antiochus' policies remained in Jerusalem. An edict was promulgated interdicting the observance of the holidays, the Sabbath, and circumcision. The statue of Jupiter was erected in the holy temple above the altar. To this statue, the people brought the sacrifices of pig meat, the animal which is an abomination to the Jews. Because of this religion persecution, the legitimate high priest Onias III and many other Jews fled into African countries such as Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya. Throughout the last 2,500 years, the main factors that have contributed to the social migration of the Jews were wars, religious persecution, and commerce. All of these factors were operating and gave rise to the African Jewish population. In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa. Fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery, the slave markets were filled full of black Jewish slaves. This prophecy and all the residue of the prophecies contained in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verses 15 through 68 befell the black Jews after they disobeyed the laws of God. Many nations transported the Jews into slavery, and the sons of Israel transmigrated to every continent. The Jewish philosopher Philo, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, said that 1 million Jews resided in Libya and Egypt from the Katabathmos to the borders of Ethiopia. Professor Gabe says that Philo leaves us doubtful about which boundaries of Ethiopia he meant. I think that Philo meant the western and southern boundaries of Ethiopia because the prophet Zephaniah mentioned, "From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, the daughters of my dispersed." There was a period of over 600 years between Zephaniah and Philo, and considering the new waves of immigrants coming into Africa, they had 600 years to penetrate toward all the borders of Ethiopia. E. Shurer wrote that Hebrewism was detectable by its inscriptions from the Egyptian border westward across North Africa and Mauritania. Gabe says that Jerome wrote that the Jews were spread from the western extremity of Mauritania to India. Now, ancient Mauritania included part of the territory on the Atlantic Ocean, Morocco, and part of modern Algeria. It is certain that the Jews had migrated all across North America by the 2nd century. Some scholars fix the date earlier than this. The Greek historian and geographer Strabo said concerning the Jews of Libya, "Now these Jews already have gotten into all cities, and it is hard to find in a habitable earth that has not admitted this tribe of men and is not possessed by it. And it has come to pass that Egypt and Libya, as having the same governors, and a great many other nations imitate their way of living, maintain great bodies of these Jews in a particular manner, and grow up to greater prosperity with them, and make use of the same laws with that nation also." After the fall of the Carthaginian metropolis in North Africa, Roman power became dominant in the Barbary states. Under Roman control and power, the Jews of Asia and North Africa rebelled. The Jews considered themselves numerous enough to challenge Roman authority in the east and the south. Because of their numbers, the Jews almost subdued their adversaries, who had compelled them to suffer many atrocities and indignities. Emperor Trajan sent his general Turbo to bring law and order. Instead of bringing law and order, the act of suppression of insurrection brought a massacre. The suppression of rebellion under the slogan of law and order may be good principle, but a good thing may be carried too far. So it was in this case. The pagans and the Romans attacked the Jews indiscriminately, both the Jewish soldiers and the uninvolved peaceful population without mercy. As a result of this merciless attack, many Jews fled to those parts of the northwest Africa known as Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. Many other Jews fled to the areas where Rome did not have any jurisdiction. This was to the region of the south, the Sahara Desert, and the Sudan. Brazel says, "Such is the explanation of how the Sahara Desert first acquired Jewish tribes, toughened by a fighting tradition and possessed of physical characteristics, blacks, which, it is said, still make them approximately very closely to the original Jewish population of Palestine. The Jews are an omnipresent people. They seem to exist everywhere. At the beginning of the 6th century, they were found in Spain before the Mohammedan conquest. Spain is known to the Jews as the classical land of crypto-Judaism because they find Christianity and practice Jewish rituals in secret. As early as the Roman period, the Jews of Spain had been large in number and influential. Many of them claimed to be the descendants of noble Jews in Jerusalem who had been carried into exile by General Titus. After the Visigoths, a dramatic tribe invasion, the situation got worse for the Jews because the Visigoths adopted the Arian form of Christianity and they favored the Jews. However, when they converted to Catholicism, they became zealous like any other neophytes. King Ricard ascended the throne in 580. This was the beginning of the harsh religious enactment against the Jews. When King Sisebut occupied the throne, there was a prevalence of the utmost religious fanaticism. In 616 AD, the big shock came. The king ordered the baptism of all Jews in his domain under the penalty of expulsion and the loss of all their property. According to Catholic authorities, 90,000 embraced Christianity at this time. This was forced baptism. In the 7th century, the Jews were threatened with the penalty of slavery if they were found practicing Judaism. This cruel policy caused many Jews to flee to the Mediterranean and western coasts of Africa. The southernmost point of Spain, after you cross the sea, leads you to the northern or the western coast of Africa. Throughout the Middle Ages, many European governments expelled their Jews. These black Jews migrated to neighboring countries like Turkey and Africa. The Byzantine emperors in the 5th and 6th centuries persecuted the Jews constantly. Therefore, multitudes of Jews were compelled to migrate into Sahara Desert to the south. By this time, the Sahara Desert was heavily occupied with black Jews. The Arabs pushed their way out of Arabia in the 7th century. In the year 640 AD, they attacked Egypt and continued across Africa. Then a Jewish queen named Dia Kahina organized an army consisting of Jews and Berbers in order to stop the penetration of the Muslims in North Africa. The queen vanquished the Arabs, and the people of Africa rejoiced in her victory. Years later, the Mohammedans fought the army of this Jewish queen once more, and she was defeated. She was defeated the second time because of jealousy of different people in various tribes. Having become disgusted, her son turned Muslim and participated in the Islamic conquest of Spain in the year 711 AD. The ancient Black Empire of Ghana was established in the Western Sudan. During the colonial period, the Western Sudan was called French West Africa. The northern boundary of this region is the Sahara Desert. The western and southern border is Lake Chad. Some rivers of this region are Senegal, the Gambia, the Volta, the Benin, the Ligone, and last but not least is the most famous Niger River. This river flows from the Guinea Highlands northeast to the famous cities of Timbuktu and Gayo. Then it makes a sharp turn and flows southeast toward the city of Benin in Nigeria. In ancient times, the Carthaginians from North Africa penetrated the Sahara Desert and the Western Sudan during the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC. When North and Eastern Africa had amassed over 1 million Jews, these Jews began a continuous migration to the region of the Niger River. According to the researches of Nahum Slaughter, the tradition of the Jewish traders in the Sahara stretches back to biblical times. Slouch continues, and it is not at all surprising to encounter in every part of the desert traces and even survivals of a primitive Judaism which at one time played an important role in the whole region of the Sahara from Senegal to the very borders of Somaliland. As I have mentioned earlier, this region that extends across the entire width of Africa below the Sahara Desert from Senegal to Somaliland is known as the Sudan or Black Africa. Between the 2nd and the 3rd centuries, the black Jews of Arabia continued migrating across the Red Sea to Ethiopia. The largest exodus of the Jews occurred during the persecution by the Arabs led by Muhammad. He had said on his dying bed that he wanted Islam to be supreme throughout all of Arabia. There was a Jewish tribe called Rechab which crossed the Red Sea and migrated to the extreme point of the western Sudan. At the same time that the Jews were migrating westward across the Sudan from Ethiopia, they also migrated southward from Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco to the fertile region between the Senegal and Niger rivers. When the Jews from the north and the east met between these two rivers, they established a confluence or crossroad in Africa where men could exchange their culture, ideas, and merchandise. These Jewish migrations went on with great frequency about 300 AD, and they continued with the utmost regularity for 1200 years. Joseph Williams points out the course of the Jewish migration from northeastern Africa. He writes that the Jews migrated up the Nile, passing Memphis, Elephantine, Khartoum, and then they turned west at Kordofan in central Sudan. In the region of the White Nile, Williams thinks some Jews settled in the country of the Shilluk in the southern Sudan and in Uganda. He continues by tracing the migrations from Kordofan to Darfur, Lake Chad, Kano, and then to the countries of the Niger River. The original habitation of the Songhai people was Gunian, Kunkia, or Kuka. This place was situated in the Dindi country and known as Dindina, lying near the Niger River on the northwestern border of what is now the modern state of Nigeria. Many scholars think that the Songhai people came from Egypt or Ethiopia because there exist many Egyptian culture complexes among them. For example, the preparation of the dead body for burial. Za el-Yemeni came to Kuka about 300 AD, an ancient abode of the Songhai tribe. He established a line of kings known as Za Deja or the Dia dynasty. The founder of this first Sudanic dynasty in Western Africa was a black Jew. His name is sometimes written Za al-Ayaman. Joseph Williams says that a citizen of Timbuktu named Al-Daharan in his book Tariqa es-Sudan that Zal Ayaman was derived from Dza Min el-Yemen, which means that he is one who came from Yemen. Za el-Yemeni came to the Niger country by the way of Ouargla, the central Algeria. Ouargla was a great trading center for the black Jews. Dr. Barth and Professor Gabe says that Za, the founder of the first Jewish dynasty, established his capital later at Jao on the eastern upper Niger River. The Arabs, Moors, and the Sudanic writers attribute to the ancient black African Hebrews the establishment of the first empires, the erection of the first public buildings in the country, the construction of the first canals and irrigation systems, and the institution of a social economic regime which still survives in all Saharan communities. By what factors can we explain the emergence of black Hebrew homogeny and leadership over the indigenous tribes? The answer is simple. The Jews came into the Western Sudan from northern and eastern Africa as a result of a chain of commercial and persecutory migration. The Jews had settled among the most civilized people throughout the ages. They adopted new methods from other people and left their material, educational, and moral imprint among people with whom they resided. For many centuries, the Hebrews had to employ great physical and physiological initiative. They could not afford to be complacent or apathetic. They were hated, so apathy could mean cultural stagnation or death. The Jews imported into the western part of Africa a superior material, educational, and moral culture. And soon after 300 AD, this cultural advancement was not duplicated or exceeded until the ascendancy of the Mohammedan leader Mansa Khan Musa of Mali in 1312 AD. In the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, the Africans on the west coast did not possess the cultural superiority of the Africans on the north and east coast. The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture, history, laws, and written records with them. This assured them a constant precedent for the development of a higher social organization. Because of the stability of the black Jewish culture, the Jews were not absorbed into the regular population. In fact, the Jews absorbed some of the native tribes. The Jews made use of every opportunity. They were an industrious and skillful people. In the Jewish Ghanaian states were found kings, princes, governors, generals, secretaries, treasurers, revenue agents, judges, architects, engineers, doctors, historians, language interpreters, mathematicians, jewelers, sculptors, masons, carpenters, painters of art, goldsmiths, leather workers, potters, armorers, saddlers, blacksmiths, agriculturists, etc. The black Hebrew kings of Ghana had two titles: Kayamaga, which is the master of gold, and Ghana, which is the war chief. Professor Gabe says that 22 Hebrew kings reigned in Ghana before the Hajira in 622 AD, and 44 had reigned by 790. Davison makes mention of the Tariq el-Fattah, which says that Kumbi had been the capital of the vast country of the Kayamaga, while the Tariq al-Sudan states that the Kayamaga had been the name of the first king of this country. It is important that all the kings of Ghana were called by the title Kayamaga. According and concerning Kumbi, the ancient capital of Ghana, it was located in the southern part of the present country of Mali. During the Middle Ages, the name Ghana was not used to designate the country. The name of this country was Ankar, and Ghana was just the title of its kings. Having cognizance of this fact indicates the greatness and splendor of those kings, because after the decline of the Za dynasty, men began to call this country after the title of its kings, which is Ghana, and I shall do the same. In the 14th century, a Muslim writer named Ibn Battuta wrote about the women in one of the cities of Ghana. He found the women of Walata of surprising beauty, and he should have known what he was talking about because he had traveled widely. Moreover, he found another fact astounding. The women were given more respect than the men, and the males did not express any resentment or jealousy. The people did not trace their descent from a paternal head, but from their maternal brother. An individual bequeathed his legacy to his sister's son. The maternal foundation of the Ghanaian state was based on the affluence of gold and iron. The use of iron in Africa, especially Ghana, revolutionized the social and military systems. El-Zuri stated that the Ghanaians fought many wars against their neighbors who did not use iron but fought with bars of ebony. The Ghanaians could destroy their enemies because they fought with lances and swords. The king's revenue agents levied taxes on imports and exports, and the medium of exchange was gold. Concerning the kingdom of Ghana, Joseph Williams writes, whatever may be thought of the more or less mythological traditions connected with the earliest Jews in North Africa, it is now practically an established fact that a Jewish nation, Jews at least in faith and perhaps too in origin, long held sway south of the Sudan.